Psalm 27. I I love what we talked about last time. The one thing that I ask of the Lord. I look at my own life and I realize I wish I could say the one thing, but it's the 80 things. All right, the thing that David most wanted was to live in the house of the Lord all the days of his life. We talked about that as purely symbolic because there was no, first of all, well, the house of the Lord was, for David, would have been the temple, the tabernacle. He had it in his heart to build the temple. We talked all about that, but when he wrote this, the house of the Lord would have been the tabernacle. Now, there was no provision. There were no rooms in the tabernacle to live in. So, was a very symbolic statement of the idea I want to dwell, I want to live where you are. For us, on this side of the cross, and I think he would have had this sense as well, that God is everywhere. If wherever I am, he is there. I can't. And in fact, if one of his psalms, he said, I can't go anywhere that you're not. So, okay. But we got to remember, he is talking in very poetic and artistic and symbolic language. To live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. I did get pretty pointed last time about what's your one thing. And I look at this, and I can only look into my own life. Can't look into yours. It wouldn't be fair. Wouldn't be right. But when I look into my own life, I have this strong sense that there are certain days I would love to live in God's house, in his presence, to be fully there, right? But some other days kind of just don't get in my business, God, all right? I think that's kind of the way most Americans live most of their lives. The research and the surveys that are done still, even today in our highly secularized culture, the majority of people still believe in God. But I wonder, and I know I'm projecting my own sin and my own flaw into the rest of, well, the American world anyway, when I say, I think we love the idea of God if he just stays out of our way. What we want is a parachute that matches my ensemble and doesn't bother me, right? We want a God who will give us what we can't get for ourselves. But really, other than that, don't make yourself a nuisance. Ooh, that's pretty harsh. I think it's pretty true. And then here's what he wants to do when he lives in the house of the Lord all the days of his life: delighting in the Lord's perfections and meditating in his temple. That's pretty interesting idea. Delighting in his perfections. I go through periods of time where, and this is my problem, not yours, I don't, there's just not much delight in it. I mean, I keep going because I know I'm supposed to keep going. My relationship with God from time to time, and I'm grateful it's not always, but it does from time to time become academic. It is not about, that if you were raised in the church on Easter, I'll bet you sang the song. You ask me how I know he lives. He lives within my heart. Okay. First of all, that was a song when I was a kid we loved to sing, and we sang it often. As an adult, I examine the text and think, if that's the only way you know he lives, you are in deep doo-doo, my friend. And there are times when the only way I know he lives is because I read it in Scripture. I read Scripture every morning, and some mornings it doesn't connect at all. Other mornings it does. This morning, I'm in Isaiah these days, going through the whole Bible. Man, it spoke to me. It was loud and clear. It spoke directly into my life and my situation. But I don't always have that. There are times when, if there's a delight-o-meter, it's somewhere in the middle or a little below meter, but it's not pegged out. There are times when it is. I have had moments of ecstasy in delighting in God and his provision, his goodness, his perfection. I want that to happen more normally. I want that to be more characteristic of my life. To delight in God's perfections, in my thinking, there has to be a few things happen. First of all, I've got to identify what his perfections are. Okay, the big idea of his perfection is that he is absolutely, not relatively, absolutely perfect. It is not possible for God to have made or to make a mistake. Everything he does is right. Okay. And so at that point, for me, the great divide between God and man, that's where I see it the most. Because I am not always right. I don't always do the right thing. I am way capable of making mistakes. And there are times I make mistakes by intention. That's not even possible with God. He is perfect. Now, to delight in the Lord's perfections, we have to get specific about, but okay, using probably my second favorite counseling question that I ask, what's that look like? What are the perfections of God that I can see? One of the easiest ones, the lowest hanging fruit in my opinion, is nature. I've talked about this before, but I'm really grateful that I love living in Las Vegas. And one of the things about Las Vegas, if you've ever been here and gotten off the strip and out into the city, you realize if you look to the west, there are beautiful mountains. If you look to the north, there are rugged, barren mountains. But in my mind, they are beautiful. I look at this, I you know this because I say it all the time, but I love going to the Grand Canyon. It's perfect. I love looking at little babies and holding them. Don't put me in the nursery, but at church, because I love holding babies. until they get really needing mama, and then I love handing them back. But boy, have you ever just looked at a little baby's fingers and toes and nose? I mean, okay. There's the physical perfection that I can see around me that is an expression of God's perfection. There's also relational perfection. And it only happens a little and not very often. But have you ever been in a relationship that truly, for that moment, was just perfect? Probably. Okay, there's spiritual perfection. I have not yet experienced spiritual perfection. But according to almost the entirety of Paul's writings in the New Testament, I am in the process of being made perfect. To delight in God's perfections means I have to identify them, and to do that, I'm going to have to slow down. I identify them, and then I have to stay slowed down in order to delight in them. You do realize that, well, if you don't, let me just clue you in that it is very difficult to delight in a hurry. It's a horrible movie in some ways, but in the National Lampoon's European Vacation, Chevy Chase, his character is the dad. They're in Paris, and he says, this is the Louvre. We got 30 minutes. Well, the irony and the humor of that is there's no way you can take in the Louvre in 30 minutes. Never been, someday I hope to, but people who have been, they tell me it would take days, not minutes, to take in the Louvre. And that's the way with delighting in God's perfections. You have to go slow. Depending on what season of life you're in, that might be easy, but it won't be for most of our lives. I mean, I'm in a season of my life where I've got more latitude to go slow than I've ever had. But I don't have a habit of going slow yet. And so I still have to put some effort into going slow. And to delight in the Lord's perfections, I have to go slow. And then he says, in meditating in his temple, to meditate, as David is talking here, or writing, has the most useful word picture I've ever gotten or read for that is how a cow digests. It chews and swallows, comes back up, chews and swallows, it comes back up, chews and swallows. I don't know, what do they have, 5 stomachs or some crazy thing? For David, dwelling on so that he can delight in the perfections of God requires meditation. Meditation is not emptying your mind. It is focusing your mind singularly. I want to challenge you to slow down. It will cost you time, and it's worth it, but it won't. For most of us, it's not an easy thing. Slow down, take the time, and meditate on whatever you can identify as the perfections of God. Think about them. Replay them in your mind. Remember the times when you have seen them, and to the degree that you're almost reliving them. Delight delight in the perfections of the Lord. Well, gosh, I go at a snail's pace. We'll try it again next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.